Welcome back, Officers Republics, your correspondent role police chief, APGAINS. We're going to not waste any time. We're going to talk about when you should farm SLKR because it is going to be different for a lot of you. There are a lot of nuances. This character does a lot of things really well and does some things really poorly. So we want to make sure that you can optimize your roster by adding SLKR because SLKR, great character, but very important we add them at the right time. Before we get started, at the end of the video, I'll have a link to one of my favorite small YouTube channels. You guys got them from 100 to about 800 subscribers in a day. So here are your Scooby snacks. Thank you very much. At the end of the video, I'll have another link to his channel if you guys want to subscribe, get him to 1,000 subscribers. If we do that, everyone gets 2 Scooby snacks. I know. Mind-breaking, bending, and other B words that mean changing the shape of the mind. Yes. All right. So SLKR. SLKR is one of the better offensive GLs. Let me pop him in here. Let's just filter for first order so we don't have to keep popping around. He is one of the better offensive GLs. Ironically, he's best used on offense without other first order characters, taking advantage of the Night Sister zombie DACA cheese and a lot of other stuff like that because he can be a little squishy when going up against other Galactic Legends. But he definitely has kind of a Jedi Knight Luke viability. Like, with some mixing and some matching and some finagling, he does a lot of damage, and you just got to construct a team around him to make sure he doesn't die. At the current time of recording this, no lifter unit like Rey has Ben Swolo, Lord Vader has Maul, and Kenobi has Cat, but likely in the next 6 months, I would imagine he'd get Big Titty Goth Girlfriend Rey as a lifter unit. I would imagine elevating him to the same level of the other Galactic Legends. But that is pure speculation. His team does have an Omicron in the First Order TIE Pilot. As you see here, my Gear 2 First Order TIE Pilot Omicron is very well applied. And the First Order team as a whole struggles very mightily as characters. I would say C team with the Omicron, D or F tier team without it. So one of the main issues earlier on, before the Omicron, before we were pretty much guaranteed to get a lifter unit, one of the main concerns was a lot of the Galactic Legends don't have great requirements, so you're not really building teams, right? And when you're building these kind of Galactic Legends who don't have great requirements, like C, like SLKR, and pretty much like Rey too, the issue is that wherever your account is right now, it's not going to really get better until you go a year forward and unlock the Galactic Legend. And that can be boring. I mean, that can be stagnant. You're not going to become any better in the game. You're not going to push higher into Grand Arena, get more crystals. You're not going to get more wins. You're basically staying in a state of limbo until then. Now, fortunately for SLKR a while ago, they added a ship that boosted his fleet. So now you don't have to worry about the characters being terrible. The fleet is really good, which can be awesome. So that comes to our first point of when you should farm SLKR. The first point when you should farm SLKR is, and obviously caveat, you should only ever farm a Galactic Legend at any point after you have your core 8 teams so that you actually have a stable, well-constructed account that's going to get wins while you're farming something that won't really increase your account until you actually get it. But the Finalizer is actually really good, and it's actually a pretty affordable fleet as well. A lot of the ships and captains can be passively farmed through stores and stuff like that, and the Finalizer event isn't too terribly difficult to unlock. I would say the number one reason for people to farm SLKR first as their first Galactic Legend is you have your core 8, but you've neglected ships. Let's go into my capital ships, wherever they may be. Let's say I don't have Malevolence or Negotiator Executor, obviously, and I just have like a standard HOM-1. You're one of those classic boys. You got the Endurance, the Executrix, the HOM-1. Maybe you have the Millennium Falcon, but your ships are just god-awful. If your ships are god-awful and you got all your core teams set up, I mean, your ship shouldn't be god-awful, but let's just say they are. The Finalizer is an absolute powerhouse of a fleet, and that's likely where you're going to want to look as your first Galactic Legend. We're doing roster reviews every night, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, helping players get better in the game. If they got their core teams and they're saying, APGAINS, should I go for JMK, JML, SLKR, C, what should I do? And I look at their fleets and identify that their roster is good, but their fleets are bad, SLKR is always the Galactic Legend that I recommend because he's going to be the quickest way to boost up those fleets, and that kind of negates the part of farming, like, say, Sith Eternal Emperor, where when you start the Sith Eternal Emperor farm, when you finish it, your account doesn't get any better. I mean, C happens to be the worst GL, but we're going to do a series on when you should farm all the Galactic Legends, and believe it or not, there is actually a time you should farm C. But in this situation, instead of not getting better, now that the new ship's in the game, you actually can improve your roster quite a bit during the process of farming the First Order, which can be incredibly helpful for a lot of players. Now, until we know how good Big Titty Gothray is, and when she's coming out, not all that sort of good stuff, it's still not going to be advised to have SLKR as your first Galactic Legend if you have all your core teams and your ships are also really good. You got a really strong Negotiator and you're working on your Malevolence, you got, a Chimera with some Interceptor action, or you got some nice Rebels working up, or whatever you may be doing. If your ships for your level are really good, it's likely still much better to go for a JML or a JMK before SLKR, but that is simply just because we don't know what Big Titty Goth Girlfriend Ray does. Now, if that team becomes the #1 team in all of Galaxy of Heroes after Ray comes to the game, and JMK is no longer the top dog by a long shot, it could very likely be that SLKR becomes your first Galactic Legend all of the time, because he'll be the best. But until he is, we have to kind of put a shoe in that, because right now he's maybe the fourth, maybe the fourth or fifth best Galactic Legend in the game. You know what, we'll just stick him in at fourth. He's the fourth best Galactic Legend in the game. And when we have 3 currencies, time, money, will to live. If we're limited on time and we're limited on money, we have to make sure that we're getting the characters that are going to give us the most bang for our buck for the longest amount of time. Right now, SLKR is not that character, but there very likely could be a moment in the next 6 months to a year where he does become that. Now, I never tell people to farm stuff speculating about what could happen, because a lot of times that's led people to ruin. Lots of people will tell you cautionary tales of, way back in the day, I farmed this team or I farmed that team, expecting, because the entire community was expecting this to happen, and then it never happened, and you've wasted a year of your life. So I'm still going to be cautious and tell you guys that, continue your farms, unless you're in the case of your ships need to be improved quite a bit. So let's say you already have a Galactic Legend. You already have your JML, your JMK. Should SLKR be your second Galactic Legend? Now, again, if you're going in and you have a Galactic Legend and you don't want to farm the Executive for whatever reason, you're a mad lad, you should do it. You should always go Core 8 into GL into Executor. But let's say you have Core 8, GL, Executor, and you really want better ships. You should farm the Profundity, but let's say you don't want to farm the Profundity for whatever reason, right? You just refuse. You have some sort of religious exemption from farming the Profundity, and you really want a GL, and you really want those ships to improve. Again, that's kind of where SLKR slots in. He tends to be at this point in the game, he tends to be that utility GL that will give you good stuff on offense, not great on defense, but he'll give you a good offensive team. He'll give you a C-tier team with the Omicron as characters, but he will give you an A-tier fleet. So if you really, really, really want to boost up those fleets, like, again, I always say don't speculate this far in advance, but they add an extra fleet zone. So now instead of 3 on defense and 3 on offense, you need 4 on defense and 4 on offense, and you want a quick hitter A-tier team to get up and running. That can be a good situation to slide. Absolutely a slide SLKR right in there. As far as my account goes, let me just pop this up. Obviously, I'm farming the Profundity because I'm a smart boy. But I have JMK, JML, great core, solid ships. Obviously, once the Profundity comes, they'll be a lot better. I place a lot more value, especially since I have a stable fleet account, in characters like Maul, Malgus, Starkiller, characters where there's minimum requirements to get them up and running, but they're going to give you great value, because SLKR and most GLs actually don't give you a ton of value. The value in GLs is they can't be killed, and if you're after like 3 or 4 million GP, GLs kind of lose that can't be killed identity, and a lot of their value goes downhill. Ironically, they don't really have value in that can't be killed early game, because if your opponent has just went wider than you, they'll place teams that you can't beat on defense and out efficiency you every single time. But yeah, so I mean, it's kind of it's an interesting situation, because like, I love ships and I want the finalizer fleet, but the value I get from the Profundity, the Malgus, the Maul, and the Starkiller are just so much higher. So I think after I have Maul and Malgus Mando teams up and running, I've cleared up my Rebel ships and my Executor ships to higher relics, and I've gotten Starkiller. I think that's likely where I'm going to shoehorn SLKR in. And I think that's probably going to be the optimal play. You start with your core 8. You get the best Galactic Legend in Jedi Master Kenobi, especially because Cat is in Proving Grounds way earlier. You're going to have access to that way earlier, right? Let's say you're a new player farming up and you're like, oh, but, SLKR is going to get this character soon. You're not going to be 4 million GP, and even when you are, it's going to be a year after he's out of Conquest before he comes back to Proving Grounds. So it's going to be 2 years of your life before you can actually access this character. So just by the fact of Cat being in Proving Grounds earlier, and I know Proving Grounds is not a great game mode. I hate it as much as you do. But it is going to save you a calendar year of your life. I think the still strategy is Core 8, JMK, Executor. Probably after that, it's probably going to be the Profundity into a second Galactic Legend, but you could likely go second Galactic Legend into Profundity. You can maybe go SLKR, not SLKR, Star Killer into Profundity. You can go Profundity into Star Killer into Galactic Legend. But I think likely the path is going to be SLKR is probably still going to be that solid third Galactic Legend after you have the Executor, after you have the Profundity, after you have your Conquest characters and your Star Killer. I think he has a really good home at that point. That's probably around the 6.5 to 7 million galactic power. I think he has a really good home there. I think that's where the most value from the character comes out. Because something I haven't talked about is you can farm up the First Order fleet and even get maybe a relic on crew and some Gear 11s or Gear 12s. Like, you can have a good fleet without having to actually farm SLKR. And I think that's one of the better things about the First Order faction is that you don't really need to commit to the Galactic Legend to get a lot out of the fleet. Believe it or not, even at 5.4 million GP, I'm getting a lot out of this fleet. I'll probably throw in a random crew relic here and then, maybe Gear 10 these characters, bring stars up on Finalizer, and get a lot more value out of this fleet without having to commit multiple arduous months of my life to getting Kylo Ren. And I think that's where a lot of the value lies in the First Order. And, kind of pick SLKR up, third GL, maybe second if you don't like JML for whatever reason. Though I think JML will still be better. Thank you guys so much for watching. As I promised, link, boom, right there. If we get him to 1,000 subscribers, everyone gets 2 Scooby Snacks. Thank you guys so much for watching. As always, I love you, and I'll see you later.